The ego is not a fixed entity. It is merely a collection of concepts we assign to ourselves. We fall into the delusion that I am this talent, I am that fame, or I am this beloved person. In Buddhist philosophy, this is the reality of anatta, non-self, obscured by the mist of avidya, ignorance. We cling to external labels to validate our existence. The ego constantly craves a sense of completeness, believing that happiness lies in possessing ornaments for the self, wealth, fame, or worldly recognition. The ego is an illusion because it is forever directed outward. It creates a goal such as when I am rich, I will be happy, and calls it an ideal. The moment one touches the pinnacle of talent or fame, a naked truth emerges. That sense of satisfaction is merely fleeting. This is the self-destructive mechanism of illusion. As soon as a goal is reached, the ego fills the void. Instead of stopping, it weaves a new illusion, a greater ideal to fill that emptiness. For example, someone who views romantic love as the sole savior of happiness will soon realize that clinging to another only brings suffering. When the illusion of eternal love shatters, they wander off to find another person or another pleasure, hoping that this time it will be real. Enlightenment is not the act of destroying the ego by force, but rather allowing the ego to see through its own helplessness. Every time an illusion shatters, the ego is wounded. Yet within that disillusionment, prajna begins to dawn. After enough chasing, one realizes that everything grasped externally is anicca, impermanent. Lao Tzu wrote in the Tao Te Ching, misfortune is what fortune rests upon. Fortune is where misfortune hides. The loss of an illusion is actually a blessing, as it strips away the ego's artificial layers. When illusions continuously dissolve and collapse, the mind finds nowhere left to cling. Letting go is no longer a choice. It becomes the inevitable result of clear seeing. The saying, when a single defilement returns to the truth, the 10 kings of the world shall return to the gods, carries a profound meaning of total transformation, the collapse of the old world view. When we release the final attachment, the ego loses its footing and vanishes. At this moment, the entire kingdom built by the ego systems of right and wrong, winning and losing, profit and loss, collapses along with it. When the illusion is gone, what remains is the Tao, the truth. In Buddhism, this is described as the clouds parting for the moon to reveal itself. You realize that happiness is not something to be achieved, but is the natural state when the mind is no longer bound. When the illusion is gone, what remains is the Tao, the truth. In Buddhism, this is described as the clouds parting for the moon to reveal itself. You realize that happiness is not something to be achieved, but is the natural state when the mind is no longer bound. What we call loss in life is actually the universe's way of peeling back the layers of illusion. When you lose something you once considered happiness, you are actually moving one step closer to true happiness, a joy that does not come from the outside, does not depend on fame or talent, but arises from the stillness of a soul that no longer has an ego. We spend our entire lives building a fortress called the ego. We reinforce its walls with talent, decorate its halls with fame, and warm its rooms with love. But have you ever wondered, why is it that even when we reach the peak of our ideals, we still feel a strange haunting emptiness? Lao Tzu and the Buddha taught that the ego is an illusion. It deceives us into believing that happiness lies out there in the admiration of the crowd or in the promise of a perfect relationship. But look closely. Every time you achieve a talent or gain a reputation, that illusion begins to dissolve. It fades because its nature is not real. It is like chasing the horizon. The farther you walk, the farther it recedes. When one illusion collapses, the ego trembles and desperately seeks another shadow to cling to. The process of awakening is not an effort to achieve something lofty or supernatural. It is quite simply the process of disillusionment. Each time an ideal shatters, a part of the ego dies with it. We must let it dissolve again and again until there is nothing left to grasp. Only then, when there is no longer a self to protect, does the pain of loss cease to exist. The ancients said, when a single defilement returns to the truth, the 10 kings of the world shall return to the gods. When you let go of everything you have created, the entire world of shadows you so laboriously built will collapse, making way for the only truth that ever was. Loss is not a tragedy. Loss is the liberation of the soul from the chains of illusion. When you truly have nothing left to lose, you become everything.